Welcome to the Autosportradio.com 2020 program. I'm your host, Don Kay. We are still being allowed in the Grant King race shops. And you notice the background. We don't show any cars now because they got different cars, all Grant King cars. They got a new display. You're going to want to come and see it. I mean, it is spectacular. Remember, they are located 8155 Crawfordsville Road, and it's just east of Country Club. So if you get to Country Club Road on Crawfordsville, you want too far, turn around, go back to the second driveway and turn right, and run in and see it. If you want to come out, give them a call, make sure they're here. The number is 317-820-3595. Today's show is presented by Honda and Honda HPD, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, the NTT IndyCar Series, SVRA, and McGilvery's Pub and Speedway. And incidentally, currently non-smoking, get in there, check it out, and it's been remodeled. It's really quite nice. Founded in 1993 to spearhead Honda's entry into IndyCar racing, Honda Performance Development was overseeing the successful racing efforts at all levels of the sport, from karting and quarter midgets to IndyCar and prototype sports cars. HPD offers race engines and competition products for professional, amateur, and entry-level racers. To get more information about HPD and the racing products, visit hpd.honda.com. Also want to recommend, if you need a dentist appointment, everybody wants to go see the dentist. Go to the best, the Indy Dental Group. Indy 500 veteran Dr. Jack Miller and his wife, Dr. Liz Lewis, have the fine practice in the state. And give them a call, make an appointment. Number is 317-846-3125. And I want to thank the Speedway cable TV people, the community television, for their editing. I want to thank Brian and Bill for everything they've done for us during these 2.5 months we've been doing this. Do you have computer problems? I do, frequently. We have a new computer guy, A+ Affordable Computer Doctor. He's a doctor. Why? Because like the old days, he makes house calls. Give him a call, find out what the problem is. If he can come by. The number is 317-328-0766. You ever wondered why these guys and gals love driving Indy cars at those speeds? Well, why don't you find out? Take a ride in the Indy Racing Experience 2-seater. You can go online to indyracingexperience.com, find the date that works for you, and in the promo box, put DK1, you get a 50% discount. Or you can call Sean at the office. The number is 317-243-7171. Tell them the same thing. You heard us before, get a discount. Are you a vintage car fan or a Trans Am fan? You need to go to svra.com and subscribe to Speed Tour Magazine. It's a first-class magazine, great stories. You'll find some of the cars and the drivers that you as a kid. They're both on the track from time to time. So check it out, svra.com, and subscribe to Speed Tour Magazine. While you're there, hit the schedule and find out where they're going to be next. If you are ready to read up on your insurance for your home, your car, or commercial property, do what most of us have done. Call PP Insurance. They're located at 5004 West 16th Street at Speedway. Call Mike Pardee. Tell them what you need. They'll help you out. You'll find you get better coverage for less money. Number 317-248-0070. And if you're into the vintage car, either you have one or you'd like one, the Grant King shops can help you. Tell them what you got. If you need it restored, they can handle it, or what you'd like to get. They have cars for sale. It's 317-820-3959. My guest today is a very special guy. He has become undoubtedly the most recognizable face and voice in all of motorsports. Not where he started out, but it's where he ended up. And he is now a member and has been inducted into the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Hall of Fame. Please welcome my friend, Mr. Bob Jenkins. Bob, how are you?
Good. How are you? I like your set. That background you have there is perfect for your show. So looking good.
When you started in broadcasting, what was your intention? Did you go to school to get into broadcasting, or did you just hit it?
No, I wanted to go into broadcasting maybe in my junior, even senior year of high school, but not the type of broadcasting that I ended up in, because I grew up in Liberty, which is a very small town in far eastern Indiana, and we're about 52 miles from Cincinnati and about 70 from Indianapolis and about 70 maybe from Dayton, and we could get radio stations in Chicago and in Canada, and I wanted to be a rock and roll disc jockey because I love music, still do, and as you know, thanks to you, I still do a radio show regarding music, and so that's what I wanted to be when I went off to college. In fact, there was a campus closed-circuit radio station in the same quadrangle that I lived in at IU, and so that was very convenient for me, and that's where I learned the basics really of radio. But then as time went on, and I've always been a racing fan, but I never really thought that I would combine broadcasting and racing. But then, you know, after knowing that disc jockey isn't going to be making much money and probably life will be limited in that area, I turned to motorsports, and it was in 1972 after working at 2 radio stations in Indiana, one in Fort Wayne and one in Valparaiso. I came to Indianapolis. Paul Page and I were both street reporters on 2 different radio stations. We would see each other now and then on the street gathering our information, and we just became friends at that time, and that's how I got into auto racing broadcasting.
You know, it's amazing how a lot of the broadcasters didn't start there or didn't have that necessarily in mind, and they end up being in it. There's something about motorsports that hooks you. Now, people really like to get into football and baseball and that kind of thing, but there's something a little different about motorsports because, number one, there's danger. And number two is, if you look at all of the other professional sports and even some collegiate sports, there's a lot of hanky-panky that goes on, but in the 50-some years I've been around, there's only been a couple people that have had a problem that I'm aware of. It's a pretty clean sport.
Yeah, and the thing with me is I was there at the right time. As you know, back in the day, it was difficult to get information on who won a race on that Sunday afternoon. You had to wait till either Monday morning to read it in the paper or wake up the next morning and learn by watching the television. But so there were networks and there were oncoming networks like ESPN that wanted to do motorsports. And it was good timing that I was there when all this was happening and stations wanted racing broadcasters. And so I'm lucky that that also happened. But the real person who did it all for me was Paul Page, because in 1968, we started, and of course, MRN was broadcasting all NASCAR races, and we thought, now wait a minute, we should do this for all the what was then USAC championship races. And so in 1968, we started what was called the IndyCar network, and we had a few stations, enough to make it worthwhile. And Paul was the anchor announcer, and I was a pit reporter, and that's how that came about. And then in 1972, wait a minute, 69. I'm all messed up on dates. I can't remember what day it is today. Anyway, the next year I was lucky enough to be named to the IMS radio network. And since then, I've had at least one job at the Speedway every year. So I'm very thankful that the people who were responsible for radio, TV, public address, all that thing kept me on all these years, because I still love it, still do PA when there are spectators in the stands. Unfortunately, that's not going to be the case for the Brickyard 400 and the GP this year, but hopefully August 23rd we'll be back to work and make it a May and August.
I think, obviously, as I said, introducing you, you probably and still are the most recognizable voice in motorsports and face. And the interesting thing I've found over the years, the number of broadcasters that have come on, like Scott Goodyear, for instance. I said, how did you learn, get out of a race car and learn how to be a broadcaster? He said, Paul Page. He showed me how, and he said, we ride back and forth to the hotel together, and we get in the car in the morning, and all of a sudden he started calling a race. And then he paused and my turn, and I learned how to pick up and go and so forth. He said the only problem was, television, you got somebody in your ear, and that took a while.
Right. Well, that's something that you get used to. You have in one ear programming what's going out over the air, and the other ear you have mostly the producer. Once in a while, the director will talk to you, but it's mostly the producer, and the producer will tell you where we're going next. If we're following the leader, then the producer will tell you, well, now we're going to the battle for third or whatever. And he will also notify you when it's time for a commercial. He'll give you a count into the commercial, a 10 count. And by the time he gets to 1, you have better shut up by that time. And then, of course, he'll count you into coming back to the race. So, yeah, it's just something you get used to. It doesn't take very long. And I don't know. I've just been very lucky in my career. Let's put it that way.
When ESPN started up, and 72 or 73 when they started, you were the first motorsports personality they brought in, right? Were you not?
Yeah. In fact, I was one of 3 people that were hired before ESPN went on the air. I think both of them now, the other 2 are deceased, but maybe not. I don't know. Anyway, I was one of the first 3 to be hired by ESPN. And we began by televising a sprint car race in Salem, and that was in 1979. And then as time went on in 1980, started doing more and more and more. That evolved into Saturday night or Thursday night or whatever night thunder, doing sprint and midget races from generally areas or tracks in the Indianapolis area, the Speedrome, Eldora, so on and so forth. Once in a while, we would venture off to, I remember doing a couple of stock car races in Springfield, Illinois on the mile there. But it was mostly sprint and midget races on Thunder. And, you know, that's where a lot of drivers that we now consider legends started. Jeff Gordon, others that, Kenny Irwin gained fame, I think, on Thunder, Ryan Newman, so on and so forth. So it was a good exposure for those guys to show their auto racing ability that therefore moved them up into a higher level of racing.
You did a number of years of NASCAR, and sitting next to you was a guy that became very close friends with, Benny Parsons. That had to be, you listen to some of the stories about him and the tour, that had to be a great time to be in the business.
Well, there isn't a person that I ever met that I liked, and I'm not ashamed to use the word loved, as much as I did Benny Parsons. Ned, of course, was also there, and Ned was a tremendous guy. He had an ability to, one of the things that really made me appreciate him, of course, Dale, his son, was driving at that time, and he had a stopwatch, and he would time something regarding Dale every lap, whether it was his time around the track or distance between him and the person in front of him, so on and so forth. But he also knew exactly what was going on the television and what we were talking about all that time. So he was a person who multitasked very well. But BP was just the best. He really was. I still miss him. I really do, although he's been gone for several years. But there's never been anyone that was kinder to people, who cared about racing, who cared about fans as much as Benny did. And he would have little sayings. He would have things that he would and wouldn't do. And it was just so much fun being with him. I rode to most of the races on Sunday morning with him, and we'd turn on the radio and we'd sing along. So kind of out of character for BP, but not really, because he was just that kind on the track and off the track.
It's amazing when you think about success he had in his career and the notoriety he got and how well known he became starting out as a taxi driver, I believe, in Detroit.
Yeah, yeah. As I recall, he went there for work and found work, but he also found his career in auto racing there. And so I'm glad that that happened because, yeah, he was an incredible race driver in addition to being the type of person that he was. And he was very good on the air, too. I mean, he won an Emmy for his work on ESPN, something that I've never done. But, it was given for color commentary and insight and so forth. And BP was the winner of an Emmy. So good for him.
I think of him almost every day, almost every meal. One of his sayings was after he finished a meal, one meal, one shirt.
Yeah, and
he traveled
somehow
case full of shirts and a couple of pairs of socks.
Yeah, somehow, that's rubbed off onto me because I that's the same way I am these days. But BP, he loved to eat, first of all, and besides that, he knew where to go to eat because he'd been going to these tracks that we were now broadcasting from as a driver, and knew exactly where the best food was, and regardless of whether there was room for us, the owner of the place made room because he was Benny Parsons. But yeah, he was a little sloppy at times getting his meal on his shirt, but that was just part of BP. And the only thing that BP would not do is sign autographs while he was eating. And I think that a lot of people knew that even when we started out as broadcasters. You could approach Benny while we were sitting there waiting on our food, and you could definitely approach him after he was finished with his food, but not while he was grazing, because BP just was concentrating on shoving things into his mouth and not doing autographs.
I think it says a lot about what you have brought to the broadcasting of motorsports. What was it when you were told, how did you react when you were told that you had been selected to become a member of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Hall of Fame?
Oh, well, it was the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. And with my wife, Pam, dying in 2012, I don't have very many things that get me excited, and that I live for. But when I first of all, I'd been on the ballot for several years, and I told myself, compared to everybody else on the ballot, you're going to be one of the last, if you ever make the Hall of Fame. And when I got the letter, which I still have framed over on my desk, it was something that I could hardly deal with. The letter stated, and it was received in, I think, late February, but the letter stated, now you can't say anything about this and let it out of the bag because we want it to be a surprise when we officially announce through news releases that you and Dan Weldon were selected. Well, I got to tell you, I broke that suggestion because I got on the phone immediately and I said, please don't say anything about this, but I've been elected to the Hall of Fame. And yeah, there's nothing that's ever been as important to me as that. I love being members of Hall of Fames, and I would certainly not be discouraged if I didn't ever become a Hall of Fame member in any other, but to be in the Hall of Fame at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, someplace that I grew up idolizing and cherishing, if you will. I never, ever, when I was growing up in Liberty, Indiana, thinking that I would rise to such an honor. And so it was the best thing, like I say, that's ever happened to me. And I wear my ring almost constantly, and it still is a big thrill every time I do put on my ring.
You have worked with a number of good broadcasters in the sport, starting early on. You started in radio, and then you went to television. Which did you enjoy more, the description and creating an image on radio, or television, where people could see it, you just analyze what was going on?
Radio is much more difficult, I found, because you do have to describe things that people cannot see. And besides that, and I reference my job as the so-called voice of the 500, the anchor announcer for the IMS radio network. You got to concentrate on four corners, and the reporters there calling into you and saying, I want to be on the air. And the 4 or 5 pit reporters, you have to keep track of them, and you have to keep track of the clock, because you should run your commercials at about the same time that you told the stations you would, and you got to take breaks on the hour. So that was a little difficult. Television, you just sit down and look at the monitor and talk about what's going on. And so I think television was a lot easier to do. That's not to say it's easy by any means, but it was for me. And I will take radio over, or television over radio, any day. And thankfully, I'm retired now and don't have to do either one.
Whenever I ask you, what have you been doing? He said, well, I make my daily walk from the front door to the mailbox and back.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't even do that anymore.
Oh.
I have a young man who I got to know in 2005 who was from Central Pennsylvania, working at an advertising agency, loved racing. And I know that people will say that's a bunch of garbage, but I do believe, at least for me, he rivals Donald Davidson, because he knows where people finished and so on and so on and so on. And he wanted to quit his job in Central Pennsylvania and come to Indianapolis or vicinity to get involved in auto racing. And so he came to Indianapolis, Crawfordsville to be exact, the day after I left for a 3-month stay in Florida. So he stayed at my house every day. And it was hoped that he would find a job quickly after arriving here, and he did. And so he got a job working as a tour guide at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and he got a job as a pit runner for NBC Sports. But neither one of those are working right now, and so he doesn't have any income, and he's continued to stay here. So he's done a good job taking care of me. He does go to the mailbox for me, or did, while I was observing the quarantine, and goes to the store and so on and so forth. So he's been very, very helpful to me. But no, I've come out a little bit now since the pandemic is lessening. I just this past week helped with the public address at Gas City Speedway when the first night of USAC Midget Week, and that was a lot of fun. I didn't do a great deal of work. I was there. I did some interviews and would be asked my opinion on certain things several times during the races, but that was a lot of fun. So I'm doing a little bit more than I did when I got home from Florida in mid-April, or rather mid-March, until things lessened up a bit and I did get out of the house.
You just came back, and I tried to get you last week, and you said, I'm in Colorado. You went on a journey out west. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, you stopped by in Vail, Colorado, and went to the Lazier and visited Buddy and Kara Lazier while you were coming through.
Great people. We had a good time. It was kind of, do we want to go over there or do we not? It was a little off of our route, but we did, and I'm glad we did. As soon as I walked in the Tivoli Lodge, which is the facility that they own there in Vail, Kara came up to me, gave me a hug, and Buddy was on the phone on a conference call, but he joined us later. And I certainly wanted to pay my respects to Bob, who, as I told them, and as I honestly say, that Bob was one of the nicest guys to me when I met him. I mean, every time he would see me, I would see him. We would talk a little bit. He was just a great guy, and it was a very sad day when I heard that Bob had passed away because of the COVID-19. But Buddy and Kara also were tested positive from it. As a matter of fact, Kara, by the way she talked, was feeling pretty bad there at one time. But both of them, fortunately, became okay. And now Buddy is concentrating on helping his son Flynn in his racing career. And I understand that Flynn has won 2 national championships just in the last 2-3 years. And so he shows great promise in moving on and following in the footsteps of his grandfather and his dad. But it was a great time. The Tivoli Lodge is a great facility. Most of the time, they accommodate skiers, and often they are foreigners. And it is believed that possibly the COVID-19 was so prevalent in that ski area of Colorado last winter that maybe that's how it was spread so quickly. But great time, appreciate their hospitality, and I would recommend highly if you ever have the chance to go to Vail, Colorado. And if you do want to ski, that I understand is one of the greatest ski spots in the state of Colorado, if not the entire United States. And if not, just go and pay a visit to Buddy and Karen Flynn. They're good people.
I've seen. I think their son Flynn is, I believe, on the Road to Indy program. It seemed to me he was here testing the USF 2000. I think now whether he's moved up to that yet, I'm not sure. I think so, but I'm not sure.
Well, I think that he had agreed, at least in principle, to join a Indy Lights team this year. But of course, there is no Indy Lights racing this year, and so I'm sure he's going to prepare to go full strength next year, hopefully when things get underway.
Well, if he got it, after 3/4 of the talent of his father, he'll be great.
Yeah, exactly. I remember Eddie Cheever, who of course is very quotable. My 2 favorite quotes of Eddie Cheever were the Indianapolis Motor Speedway is like a living, breathing organism because it changes from minute to minute. And secondly, he described Buddy Lazier as a tenacious bulldog. And I think that's pretty accurate. I mean, Buddy was very aggressive, but he was also a very, very clean driver, and so glad that he has that 500 winning ring on his finger.
And to think that he won it with a broken back.
Yeah. Yep.
And I think Roger Penske congratulated him and said, nobody could have beat you on that day.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
You know, what's next for you? You will be here in August. Do you do anything? Now you don't even walk out to get your mail. What is your time? Dusting, vacuuming, washing windows? What?
We're going to take another trip. And when I say this, some people say, ugh. But my friend and I enjoy going to cemeteries throughout the United States and paying our respects to, at least for me, he's 41 years younger than I am, but paying respect, at least for me, those drivers who I loved when I was growing up, and visiting their gravesite and paying our last respects. And so we do that a lot on our trips. So we're going to go to the middle part of the country, starting in Nebraska, going down to Texas, over to New Orleans. That's going to be our next trip. But yeah, I'll end up doing nothing again very shortly, because hopefully the 2 jobs that he has will start hiring him and using him. So there will be a day, maybe quickly, that I will be standing around or sitting around doing nothing, and maybe even having to go get the mail from my mailbox. I don't know. I don't know whether I know where it is anymore.
You know, it's been a pleasure getting to know you. In fact, there was a kid. I lived in St. Petersburg, or Clearwater actually, and I used to go to the racetrack every Saturday. And there was a young man driving there by the name of Sport Allen.
Mm-hmm.
He and I chatted, and he would go to 500 yards, blah, blah, blah. He said, you know, I know a broadcaster. I said, who's that? He said, Bob Jenkins. I said, how did you meet him? Being from Largo, how did you run into Bob Jenkins?
I met Sport Allen, I think, the same night I met Jeff Gordon, because both are racing sprint cars at East Bay Raceway, just south of Tampa. And I would go there Pam, Pam and I, excuse me, would go down to visit her parents who were living at the time in Clearwater. And every night when they were running, I would go down to East Bay Raceway. But I think I met Sport and Jeff when we were down there shooting video for Speed Week, and mostly around Daytona, but we thought we would go over to East Bay Raceway and check on these two drivers, young drivers that we had heard about that were supposedly going to be very, very good in their career. And so I think I met Jeff and Sport at the same time. Sport didn't, of course, make it as far as Jeff did, but still, it was kind of cool seeing those guys and watching them from that point to where they ended up.
I think Sport's still driving.
Is he really?
I think so. I saw in the series he's running, and I can't remember the name of it, but he finished 4th or 5th in points. It seems to me it was last year.
Yeah. Well, you got to remember that when I did meet them, they were both like 15 years old, and so even at this point, they wouldn't be very old. So yeah, I don't doubt that a bit.
And I had he wanted to come up here and run. I got him. He worked for UPS. I knew a guy that was manager at UPS. So he gave him a job. He'd come up here. I had him come up with a test in an IndyCar, but he never came up. Why he didn't come up, I'm not sure. I never asked him. He didn't do it.
Yeah.
Well, it's amazing, the world of motorsports, the people you meet, run across. When I was in Florida, I was a superintendent, head of sales for an electrical contractor, and I sold more jobs because the people that I knew in IndyCar. You know so-and-so? Yeah. Oh, I walk in the office with a contract. How in the world to do that? Talk about racing.
Yeah. It's a great family. It really is.
It is. The thing that always amazed me early on when I was going a short track race, where I go 40, 50 a year, there'd be a dispute between two drivers. They'd go out in the parking lot and settle it.
Mm-hmm.
That night or the next morning, they'd be out swapping parts to get their cars fixed and ready to run that night.
Yeah. Yep.
It caught my attention. Interesting sport, how it works.
Right.
So, I want you to have plenty of rest before you take your next trip. I will do the day off, the rest of the day off, or you've got something going on later on. So I appreciate you taking the time and chatting with us.
Well, some people say, Bob, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to do something. I don't have a busy schedule. I'm idle most of the time, so call me whenever you want.
It worked out well since everything shut down and the Gilbys have shut down. We've been doing this for about 2.5, 3 months. My IT genius, Ted Hollick, came and said, I'd like to do Zoom. And I thought it was the guy that did the commercials for Mazda going, Zoom. I had no idea what he was talking about.
Yeah.
Thanks for your time.
Okay, thank you.
I look forward to hearing you at the Speedway in August, I hope.
Oh, so do I.
Or in October, whichever comes first.
Yeah.
For your time.
Thank you very much.
My guest has been Hall of Fame broadcaster, overall good guy, Mr. Bob Jenkins. Stick with us. We will be coming along in the next couple of weeks. We've got some more lined up for this week. We're doing this on Monday, the 22nd, I believe it is. We have a couple more coming during the week, and they'll be put on the internet. We'll let you know when. Until the next time, Don Casey, and thanks for watching.